Welcome, everyone, to our latest installment of Leader to Leader. My name is Erin Kirschenmann, and I'm the managing editor of Wine Business Monthly, and I am delighted to be joined today by Casey DiCesare, winemaker for Scheid Family Wine's innovative brands, Sunny with a Chance of Flowers, Metz Road, and Grandeur. Thanks for taking some time out, Casey.
Hey, Erin, good to see you.
So we named you a leader back in 2021, particularly for your work with the low alcohol, low calorie, no sugar, Sunny with a Chance of Flowers. But what we were really impressed by was your dedication and love of winemaking trials. As you once told me, you're running at least a dozen experiments in the vineyard or in the cellar at any one time. And as you know, we got to get to know you and learn more. You had been promoted up through the Scheid family hierarchy. And what I absolutely love is that in the press release announcing your promotion to winemaker, the vice president of winemaking, Dave Negengast, actually came out and said, with an insatiable curiosity for experimentation for the end goal of producing better wines, Casey has taken on the vital role of change maker at Scheid. His talents offer a tremendous value during this exciting time of growth and momentum for us. And I just absolutely love that. Like that somebody so high up is like, this is the guy. He's the change maker. He's going to lead us into the future. And so he even touched on, your love of experimentation. So tell me, you've always been an advocate for winemaking and viticulture trials. What sparked that curiosity?
Yeah, well, going back, Dave has been an amazing mentor to me, a true inspiration. He is an innovator in himself, and I'm lucky to work with him, underneath him. And, he's really allowed me to push the bounds and encourage me to kind of expand my knowledge. And really that's when you say, like, where does it come from? I'm just a curious person. And in terms of winemaking, I just want to figure out how to do it better or different, or we could all make Cab the same way. We could all make Sauv Blanc the same way. And but we have so much technology out there, and there's a lot of innovation going on in the industry. It's just, how do we make this Syrah get more black pepper? I don't know. That's an interesting question. How can we do that in the vineyard? What can we do in the winery to achieve that? So all those things, just really excite my interest, and yeah, it's just an enjoyable process.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And, one of the things that we talked about early on was, Sunny with a Chance of Flowers was one of those low alcohol brands, kind of one of the first in this new wave. And, to this day, we're still kind of exploring how we go about making a lower alcohol wine when the climate is warmer, the bricks just want to increase. How do you do that without losing some of that beautiful flavor that comes from a warmer climate? So tell me a little bit, when you were given this challenge, what was your thought process? How did you go about it?
Yeah, so Sunny's been a really awesome project. Really, the stem of it is we wanted to make a great tasting wine at a lower alcohol. We weren't going to put something out that was just like, okay. We wanted to taste varietally correct from, like you said, a ripe growing region. We wanted to preserve all those flavors. So originally, it was like, oh, let's make a 9% wine. Perfect. I'll throw a bunch of sugar at it. We're going to build that mouthfeel. Everybody loves sugar. It's going to taste great. But really looking at the project, can we accomplish it doing zero sugar? Can we make 85 calories? So there was kind of a broad topic to start out with, and then whittling it down. So we first started with kind of how much alcohol do we want to end up with? We're going to get that calorie reduction. We knew we'd want to end up somewhere between probably 7 to 10%. You got to have about that third drop in alcohol, because alcohol is really a lot of where the calories are, to get into that 85 calorie range. So yeah, really trying to find the sweet spot for one on what percent alcohol is going to deliver on that flavor, and not go too far where you're too diluted down. So that's where we settled on that 9% range. And then it was a matter of, what lots do we start out with? And it's been a really interesting process with the different types of de-alc methods, and then figuring out what lots play nice with de-alc. I think in general, kind of the zero low alc world has suffered a little bit from, let's just take whatever wine, let's just de-alc it. And then what's exciting about it is it's zero, not like, and can we make it taste okay? And really through this, you really need to start out with a good wine. If you take a lesser quality lot, de-alc it, you're just taking, a little less quality, taking some quality away, and you end up with something that doesn't taste very good. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of trials, a lot of experimentation, a lot of different lots. And we've been doing it for a number of years now, where we're really getting the viticulture involved in making a great tasting low alc wine. And the winemaking experimentation we've done, it's really interesting because now we basically try to make a wine out of balance to start out with, that when you de-alc, it comes back into balance. Really trying to make something extreme. It reminded me a little bit of when we had all this crazy smoke going on. It's like, okay, how do we deal with it? And one of the philosophies was, okay, let's just make the biggest, baddest wine possible. And then we know when we have to treat it, at least we'll have something left. So it's kind of the same thing with how Sunny came about. All the different varietals too, they all pose their own challenges. Um, we started off with Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. Uh, we wanted something that was fruity, varietal. Sauvignon Blanc kind of played nice to begin with. When you remove the alcohol, you're moving mid palate. You're also having tannins stand out more, and acidity also stand out more. So Sauvignon Blanc, you're not dealing with tannin, so we don't have to fight that battle so much. And there is an expectation of some level of acidity to it. So if you start out with a little bit of fatter Sauvignon Blanc to start, go through the de-alc process, usually end up with something that is fairly in balance at the end. Pinot Noir, we're back into the tannin game. How do we find those right lots of Pinot Noir to get that balance of tannin? And then Chardonnay's really been an interesting adventure of, what style of Chardonnay do we want to target? Like, are we going for that, buttery oaky thing that is the market going to like? Are we going to go for a more fruity, fresher style? And so that was an interesting adventure trying to figure out what way to go. Oak does not like de-alc. That's one thing I find. Oak gets buried. It's one of those compounds that it's like you can throw as much like oak and whatever at it, and it gets so buried in it. So it makes it really challenging to do that. But I could go on and on about the Sunny process.
No, I'm loving this. So you mentioned that you make the wine out of balance to bring it back in. Viticulturally, what does that mean? How does that affect your harvest choice or what you're doing in management?
Yeah, great question. So in general, with Sunny, we're zero sugar. So we're fermenting to dryness, for one. But we're also not picking early. We're not trying to pick, so we end up at like 12% alcohol or 11.5, and then we de-alc a little bit, so we're not touching. We want to get those right full flavors. So it really comes down to picking full ripeness, uh, even letting some acidity drop out a little bit, because when that wine gets de-alked, that acid actually comes back into balance because that acid sticks out a little bit more. And just really allowing those flavors to develop and not being afraid of letting the fruit get ripe and the fruit get big. And then when you bring it in the cellar, treating it pretty robustly. With the reds, you're going those high temperatures. You're getting as much extraction as you can out of it. With the Sauvignon Blancs, and you picking the right yeast strains to develop as much flavor as possible. So yeah, just kind of along the whole chain, picking the right yeasts that produce a lot of maybe glycerol or manoproteins or polysaccharides, things that will build richness and mouthfeel, and doing all the techniques you can on the front end with winemaking and in the viticulture. So then, yeah, you got this fat beast that you can then whittle down, and at 9%, it tastes great.
Yeah, I have to say that it is one of the fewer brands out there that is lower, that really does kind of taste like wine.
Right.
I've been on a
Thank you.
personal mission lately to find a non-alc that really just kind of speaks to me. And there's some good players out there, but I have
Yeah.
to get to find it. And I have found that the reds have been particularly difficult to find that in. And you mentioned briefly it's a little bit because of the tannin. How do you approach this differently for a red wine to make it still taste like red wine?
Right. And when we started doing the cab Pinot, you're not expecting much tannin. The lushness of the Pinot is kind of what defines it in a way. Where yet cab, you want to have that experience. You want to have tannin. You want to have structure. You want to have something that you can hold on to, and also with a richness in the mid palate. So it was really challenging to start out with, and it came down to right lot selection in terms of what vineyards we're pulling from and how big we're making the wine to start out with. It would For the Sauvignon Blanc, for the first vintage, you kind of could search around the cellar, kind of find the right Sauvignon Blanc, de-alk it, and then we've been iterating a process and making it better and better. For the cab, we really had to start at the beginning. Where's the right site? What's going to give us that biggest, richest wine? And then when we're in the winery, how are we going to make it, as robust as possible so that when it goes to the process, you still have those tannins, and then you still can build out that mid palate to stand up to, oh man, we have all this tannin to start out with. You drop all your mid palate out, now you've got this hollow center and this awful finish. So it's like, how do we really build that mid so then we can catch those tannins at the end and make it finish with a true kind of cab experience. And yeah, it was a process. It was a frustrating process, but yeah, through multiple trials, multiple lots, different kind of ways to de-alking, I feel like we got there. We're still iterating. I mean, I can't help but iterate. When my wife, she knows me enough now. It's like, if she really enjoys one dish that I cooked, she knows she's never going to have it again because I'm going to do I'm going to add more salt. I got to add this different ingredient. I got to try a different temperature. So it's, that's the world I operate my life in. So yeah, we're always iterating and striving to get a little bit better every vintage. And it's really a fun challenge.
And that's a little bit part of the fun of winemaking too, right? And every vintage is a little bit different. Every brand is a little bit different.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, going into winemaking, was I thinking I was going to be going into, making this low alc, something that's, this is not the definition of wine when you're getting but it's been really cool. I mean, kind of like I said, a lot of people make a lot of great Cabernet, and, we can make great Cabernet here too, but it's fun to be able to take a new angle, a new spin. We got this generation of sober curious and RTDs and all kinds of crazy inputs into our wine industry now that this is still wine, which is awesome. And but yeah, it's just a different take, and you're meeting that consumer where the consumer's at. So it's a really cool timing and a really fun project. It's fun having constraints, once you're like kind of living in this world, it's like, okay, how do I make this operate as best possible? Kind of having those bumpers on the bowling lane. So it's been fun.
I love that approach. Now, okay, so as much as I love Sunny and I could ask you a million questions about the winemaking process, I want to move on to another of your kind of more famous trials, right? In vineyard, native yeast fermentation for Metz Road. How did that come about? And, what were some of the trials and tribulations in that process?
Yeah, so Metz Road, we have a site called Riverview Vineyard, which is northern Monterey County, Soledad. It's on a bench right below Chalon and right across the valley from St. Lucia Highlands. So it's a really unique, cool spot. It's beautiful there. It's the weather is a little bit more extreme than St. Lucia Highlands. Really powerful winds that blow through our valley. St. Lucia Highlands, they get affected, but they're a little more protected by the side of the valley that they're on, where Riverview Vineyard really gets the full breath of all that wind. Allows for a little extended hang time. So it's a really interesting, cool site. And the Pinot and the Chard comes out of there is really great, traditionally fermented. But ultimately, we want to figure out, how do we express terroir in its most extreme, basically. And we probably could talk for an hour on what is terroir in itself.
And still not agreed.
It's not agreed, exactly. But it was an interesting question and something that we sat around a round table and figured out, okay, well, we've got this really cool site. We've got, everything, the farming's right. Now, how do we really express this location? And amongst us, well, the microbes in the vineyard, that's also part of it. So how do we capture that? Well, we could bring it back to our home facility here, and there's other commercial yeast floating around. Can we guarantee a native fermentation? Not really. So that's sort of where it started. So, well, if we can't do it here, can we do it there? Then we bonded a whole facility out there. It's kind of wild. Again, the Scheids are amazing. The fact that I'm able to do these kinds of fun projects here is really cool. And so, yeah, we bonded a facility out in the vineyard, and throughout our for multiple years, well, every year we've been testing to see if what we're achieving is truly native fermentation. ETS has great, basically DNA fingerprinting of what's out there. And it's been a really awesome trial and years of iterating on that as well, and learning kind of what the magic of native is. It's going down the routes of non-Saccharomyces yeast to the multiple generations and how many yeasts we have in there. It's really created a very distinctive wine. Those non-sacks that are in the vineyard, every year it's a little bit different, which is kind of cool. Some years it's a little more Picchia, some years a little more Tulaspora. We've had Haniospora out there. One year some Pulacarima went out there. So it was a really cool, and each of those can add different aspects of the wine. Some of these non-sacks have been isolated and are starting to be used in commercial winemaking practice. Tulaspora does really great for polysaccharide, bioprotectant, Meshikovia, really good bioprotectant. Using on some wines, it can contribute a real kind of violet aroma. I've used it on some Petit Syrahs, which is really interesting. Picchia, they've isolated some from New Zealand, does really well for thiol production. So each of these things are creating different precursors and adding multiple generations of yeast population to a fermentation. So you're potentially adding complexity, and you're adding all these yeast cells that end up dying and releasing manoproteins and polysaccharides into the environment, which is adding to the richness of a mouthfeel. So you've got that really cool portion of native. And then we haven't experienced, when we first did it, I thought that there would be one yeast, that figures its way into the fermentation, and by about halfway through would establish themselves and finish. But we've never had that happen in all of our fermentations. It's always been a couple non-sac and maybe one Saccharomyces kind of floating in the start that we catch. And then part of the way through, we're kind of 3 to 4 Saccharomyces. Midway through, we're ending from 12 to 16. And then even at the end, we've had, up to 12 different Saccharomyces chewing away at the end of a fermentation, which is really interesting, really cool. So it's been a really interesting project to see, kind of against what originally I thought would happen. But always makes a distinctive wine. Each vintage has been so different because of that. Some fermentations take 2 weeks and some took 9 months. It's and part of the pleasure. But yeah, so I think we've really found a way to truly express that vineyard. The Chardonnay, it may go through some partial malic through fermentation kind of naturally, but generally it's not going through malo. So it retains some acidity, but all those yeasts in there give it a really rich mid palate and complexity. Those native yeasts, they also give some succinic acid, which gives a sense of saltiness or minerality. So all those kind of cool, fun things are happening in the vineyard, and yeah, it's been a really cool project, really unique wines. So.
Yeah, that sounds amazing and kind of flies in the face of what I would have assumed happened as well. It sounds almost as if the fermentation in the project is affecting a little bit what's happening in the vineyard.
Totally. Yeah, no, yeah. And then, from year to year, vintage to vintage, depending on the climate and what's happening out there, different populations are doing their thing. So it's been really interesting. And that's informed some of our winemaking on the larger side as well. Having, experience with some of those non-Saccharomyces yeast and how they transform a fermentation and bring some unique characteristics. We then start applying kind of on a more controlled sense, doing some different fermentations using non-Saccharomyces yeast during the fermentation at the beginning, and then inoculating. So it's been really cool, kind of taking this crazy little project and turning it into kind of larger scale for complexity of our wines.
Yeah, I love hearing the story of Metz Road. It's very fascinating. I love it's such a great an accomplishment too, to be able to pull something like that off and learn from it and have it affect other portions of the business. But I'm kind of curious about the opposite now. Like, can you talk about a time either in your career or with a specific trial where things didn't necessarily go to plan? How did you kind of come back from that one?
Yeah, plenty of times. I try to, at least have some sort of plan of and hope of success. One trial, I could probably tell you every harvest where something went sideways on me in some fashion, but not to a total demise. But this year, so we've been trialing in the light of sunny, and then also just in general, higher alcohol productions, higher bricks. Like how do you combat that potentially? Maybe something comes in a little riper than you want. The last harvest has been, was smooth, but previous, all those heat spikes, so, you've got a lot that comes in hot. You don't want to have something end up at 15% alcohol, but, maybe 14% is better. So I did a trial this year using different yeasts and different yeast protocols to see if how much difference I can make in the ending alcohol. So there's some Saccharomyces yeast that are just bad at alcohol production, which is cool. And then there are some non-Saccharomyces yeast, Uvarum, which also are like poor ethanol producers and create some other kind of side byproducts. And Pichia, which is one of the ones I mentioned, they started using that in non-alc beer production. Kind of, there's a protocol that they do where they actually do like a small amount of fermentation with Pichia, but it's really cool because this strain supposedly can uh, take sugar and with oxygen put into the environment can then create, it just goes straight to CO2 and ethanol isn't created, which is super cool. Didn't quite work out for me. I was blasting CO2, blasting ethanol, or blasting oxygen. And it was with a small lot of Sauvignon Blanc, which like Sauvignon Blanc adding oxygen, that's like probably like the opposite of Sauvignon Blanc winemaking. But Pichia also has some side chain stuff to create thiol, so I figure maybe it'll balance itself out. And it wasn't a whole lot of wine, but that one, it didn't matter how much oxygen I put in. Um, one thing that was really interesting is, you're measuring the oxygen and kind of there's a certain level where you're saturated, and then you would think it would stay there, but there was so much yeast in the solution that the oxygen would be absorbed so quickly. So it was actually really even hard just to hype oxidize, which was, as a winemaker, I'm always so concerned about oxygen management in a fermentation and just you're moving around juices, you're moving around wines. And really in that phase, I guess that kind of pre-fermentation when yeasts are accumulating, uh, that's one thing I might try more next year. I don't know if I'd hyperox a bunch of stuff, but you know,
No, I love that. And it kind of speaks to the fact that even if something doesn't necessarily work the way you want it to, you can still find a silver lining. You can still, move forward learning something from it
totally,
or adding
totally.
some mouthfeel to a Sauvignon Blanc.
Exactly. That's what you're here for. Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole thing too with experimentation. I feel like, you have your theories, you have your ideas, but ultimately you have to be open to what the results give you. You can't force a result, and yeah, like you said, you learn something from every one of these trials. I mean, this whole idea of oxygen management is another idea that I hadn't even considered. So really cool.
So now you go ahead and move forward with that.
Exactly, exactly.
So I've loved talking to you about winemaking and about trials. You know, I find it so important that we talk to each other about all of these trials, about experimentation and the lessons we've learned. So for me, that's what makes you a leader, that you're open and willing to talk about it. But in your mind, who are you? And like we've talked so much about winemaking and trials, but like who are you as a person? Who do like what kind of leader do you think you are?
Well, thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. And you know how much I love talking about myself. So at least you gave me. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a dad. I'm a winemaker. My my grandpa always said, and it's more kind of about life, but it sort of informs kind of my outlook. Life is a gift. You have the power to think, so therefore you are the creator of you. Uh, do no harm, enjoy the gifts, and help others enjoy their gift. Uh, and especially that last portion, helping others enjoy their gift has been, some people might call me a people pleaser, but for me, that's part of my ethos. Like I really enjoy helping others. And, the trials is kind of part of that and sharing that information. It's like, it's not here just for me. Like we have a big industry where, we've made a lot of advancements in winemaking field, but there's still so much more to learn. And the more we share and the more we're all, collaborating together. So in terms of leadership, yeah, just helping others, and I also heard leadership by service. I think is a really cool concept. Serving others, gaining trust in others, gaining respect in others, and they're going to want to help you. So yeah, that's kind of my way I look at the whole thing.
No, that's wonderful. That's one thing we're always arguing about when we put together this list is how do you define a leader? Is it somebody who did something wild and crazy and changed the industry? Or is it somebody who's working quietly behind the scenes, just kind of pushing people and like acting like a cheerleader to move them on? And so it sounds like kind of your definition of leadership is really just being of service
Yeah,
and helping others.
definitely. No, and I appreciate people like you, Erin, who are giving a platform. You found me, and highlight my trials, and it's really cool. It's cool to get all that information out there. It's created a lot of connections for me, and and I feel like a lot of people learned from my trials and me from theirs as well. So thank you, Erin, for being a leader.
Oh, you're going a little far there. I feel bad because it's like every year when we were doing IQ or YVI, I would hound you. Okay, Casey, how many trials do you have? What can we talk about?
Oh no, yeah, it was so much fun. It's yeah, like I said, I just love getting out there. It's really fun talking to people. People had different takes on it too. And my wine is different from, the next person's wine. And yeah, I'm totally happy to share every protocol that I've done because, trying on your wine might come out completely different. You don't know. So um yeah, it's just all about that collaboration. So it's fun to share all that stuff.
That's wonderful. Now you're sharing information you've learned. You mentioned earlier that Dave was one of your mentors who helped kind of share and shape who you are today. Did you have any other mentors who made a big difference in getting you to be the person you are?
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, Dave, obviously a big one, especially in the wine industry. Um, I've been fortunate to have a lot of great mentors. I mean, I would say even just the quote from my grandfather, an amazing mentor to me, taught me so much about life and success and working hard. It's gotten me to this point, and I'm so fortunate to, the baton's been passed to Dave, who's really mentored me through my winemaking adventure. He's extremely strong leader, quiet. He's a really large guy. He looks big, but he's a very quiet, informed, really intelligent leader. So he's been someone really to model myself after. You heard me. I can talk and talk and talk and go and go and go, and he's able to rein me in but push me also just enough. So he's a great balance.
Wonderful. All right. My last question for you today. As we're looking forward to the future of the wine industry, to winemaking, leadership within the business, you know, is there a specific change that you're going to continue to fight for, or any ideas about how we move forward, like the needle of progress? How do we keep pushing?
Right. Yeah, that great question. Yeah, for me, it's really about kind of trying to meet that consumer with where they're at. Um, this better for you category is a really interesting space. We kind of caught on it right at the beginning, and we're fortunate to have Sunny in there. We have a generation of sober curious, which I think is kind of a funny term. I guess I'm curious about sobriety too, even though I'm not sober. But I shouldn't make fun of it. But yeah, it's meeting consumer where they're at and seeing Sunny have the success where it is. I think we just need to keep pushing the wine industry. Let's keep making great wines from great locations and high quality stuff, but we have to be able to bring the consumer to get to that point too. There's so many alternatives now out there. And ultimately, like, why do the beer guys get to have all the fun with making all these cool flavors and stuff? Like, let's get a little wild and wacky with wine too. Why not? So
Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it, right?
that's right, 100%.
There's something that I do whenever I go to the grocery store. I always buy a bottle of something off the shelf, just what looks like it's popular, what's standing out,
Mhm.
what is not normally something I would drink because I'm spoiled living here in Sonoma. And it's
For sure.
fascinating. If there's somebody else in the wine aisle, I'll talk to them, ask them what they're looking for, what they like, and they always mention a flavor. They always mention strawberry or lemon or this or that. They're not saying, oh, I want a nuanced palette of, medium tannins and this and that. So,
Totally. Exactly.
yeah, I like your comment about why do the beer guys get to have all the fun with the flavors and
Exactly.
spirits too.
Yeah. But yeah, we did a weird trial with beer and wine a few harvests ago behind the desk. It tastes okay.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was just like one of those late night harvest ideas. Oh, let's get some grain, let's put it with some juice. Yeah,
Yeah.
fun. Little it was a we called it Porter Dreams. It was a porter cab blend. Kind of funny. Yeah,
Okay.
we have our fun. We have our fun.
You got to in the end.
That's right. That's right.
All right. I'm sure you're working on a million more trials and experiments. Thank you for taking some time out today. I really appreciate it, Casey.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Erin. You're awesome. Appreciate it.
Aw, thanks. And to everyone who's continuing to watch, thank you for joining us for our Leader to Leader series. You can view all of our videos on our YouTube channel or on winebusiness.com. Thanks.